Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why studying for a test sometimes feels useless because you forget everything anyway? Well, this new study might have a clue. It dives deep into how we actually learn and when space practice really works. So what does space practice mean? It's basically not cramming all your studying into one big go. Instead, you spread it out over time. Think of it like tending a garden. You water it a little each day, not all at once before the plants die. Scientists have known for over 100 years that this spacing effect helps us remember things better. But how do you actually do this in a real classroom with real students and real complicated subjects? That's where this research comes in. The problem is most studies on spacing are done in labs with super simple stuff like memorizing word pairs. But real learning involves connecting ideas and fitting new information into what you already know. So this study wanted to see if spacing really works in K-12 classrooms. They specifically looked at whether the variety of the study material matters. They designed an experiment that involved over 1,000 middle and high school students in 52 classrooms across different subjects. The core question was this: does spacing help more when you practice the exact same concept over and over, or when you practice different but related concepts? They had students do practice sessions either spaced out over time or crammed into one session, and they played with how much variety there was in the practice questions. Basically, they divided the classrooms into 4 groups. Some students got space practice with lots of variation in the questions. Some got space practice with very little variation. Others got math practice crammed into one session with lots of variation, and the last group got math practice with very little variation. To keep things simple, when they say variability, they mean whether students were asked different questions about the same topics within the same subject. Imagine you are learning about DNA mutations. Low variability would mean practicing the same exact question about mutations multiple times, but maybe in different formats like multiple choice or fill in the blank. High variability would mean practicing different questions related to mutations, like what causes them, what are the different types, and what are their effects. And they tested students right after the learning and then again a few weeks later to see what they remembered long term. So what did they find? It turns out that how effective spacing is really depends on what you are studying. For students who practice the same content repeatedly, even if the question format changed, spacing practice definitely helped them remember better. This was especially true for long-term retention. But here is the twist. When students practice different items related to the same learning standard, space practice didn't show as much of a benefit. In fact, the benefit of spacing was pretty much gone in those high variability conditions. This is super interesting. It suggests that spacing works best when your practice sessions give you a chance to revisit and reinforce the exact same idea. If you are always jumping to new related ideas, the spaced repetition might not be locking in the first idea as effectively. Now, what about transfer? Transfer is basically being able to use what you learned in new situations. The study found that spaced practice did give a modest boost to transfer to new items. But interestingly, this transfer benefit wasn't affected by how much variability there was in the practice questions. Spacing helped with transfer a little bit whether the practice was high or low variability. This points to something really important. The effectiveness of space practice really depends on what we call overlap across practice opportunities. If your practice sessions keep hitting the same core concept even in different ways, then your brain has a chance to really retrieve and strengthen that specific memory. When you jump between different concepts, the overlap decreases, making it harder for the space practice to work its magic for pure recall. It's like your brain is building strong neural pathways to a specific idea when you repeat it, but if you only briefly touch on several slightly different ideas spaced out over time, those pathways might not become as robust. The study supports retrieval-based accounts of spacing, which basically say that spacing works because each time you retrieve information, it makes it easier to retrieve later. But this only works if you are actually retrieving the same information. The finding about transfer is also key. While spacing might not be the magic bullet for remembering different related concepts, it does seem to help us apply our knowledge more broadly. This suggests that retention and transfer might operate through slightly different mental processes. Spacing might be strengthening specific memories for recall, while also indirectly activating related ideas, which helps with transfer. So what does this mean for you? If you are a student trying to learn something deeply like a core math concept or a scientific principle, spacing your study sessions to focus on that same concept repeatedly is likely your best bet for long-term retention. Revisiting the same foundational ideas, even with different questions or activities, can be more effective than just moving from one loosely related topic to the next. For teachers, this means carefully thinking about what content you are spacing. Prioritizing key foundational concepts for repeated space retrieval practice could really boost student learning. If you want to promote transfer beyond just memorization, you might need to add other strategies on top of spacing. Things like really encouraging students to compare ideas, explain concepts to each other, or do cumulative reviews can help them build those connections. This study moves us beyond the simple question of whether to space learning and into the much more nuanced question of what to space. The key takeaway is that the success of space practice hinges on the overlap of what you are practicing. Spacing helps us retrieve and remember what we have already practiced, but to truly transfer that knowledge to new situations, even more is needed beyond just distributing study time. This is a fascinating look into how our brains learn and a great guide for making our study time as effective as possible. What are your thoughts on this? Does this resonate with your own study experiences? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating dives into the science of the mind.